Clara Scoth spent 3 years bleeding for her career at New York's most ruthless law firm. But her untouchable world violently shatters when a mysterious billionaire buys the company and completely guts her career on day one. Furious, Clara storms into the executive suite, ready to fight for the job she sacrificed everything for. But the words die in her throat the moment she sees the man sitting behind the polished mahogany desk. He isn't just her new boss. He is the devastatingly handsome stranger she secretly married in a neon-lit Las Vegas chapel 6 years ago, the husband she abandoned before sunrise. She demands an annulment, desperate to erase the mistake. But Marcus Croft didn't buy a $70 million law firm just to let her run away again. Trapping her in a transparent glass office right next to his, he delivers a chilling ultimatum. She belongs to him from 9 to 5. And if she wants to keep her career, she is going to have to prove exactly how good of a partner she can be. Prepare for the ultimate corporate trap. Episode 1. The elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor with a soft, lethal ping. Clara Scoth did not walk out. She launched herself into the hushed, vacuum-sealed quiet of the executive suite. Her heels struck the imported marble like a ticking clock. 36 months of 80-hour weeks. 3 missed Thanksgivings. 114 consecutive days of prioritizing the Vanguard litigation over her own sleep, her own sanity, her own life. She had built the architecture of that lawsuit with her bare hands. It was the multi-million-dollar case that was supposed to secure her senior partnership by Friday. Then, exactly 4 minutes ago, an automated email had hit her phone. Clara Scoth reassigned. Vanguard litigation lead transferred to executive control. Clara bypassed the heavy mahogany desk of the executive assistant. Emma Frost, the junior paralegal who usually guarded the suite with her life, took one look at Clara's eyes and silently rolled her chair backward, offering absolutely no resistance. Clara didn't knock. She pushed open the heavy, soundproofed glass doors of the CEO's corner office. The words were already loaded on her tongue. She was ready to tear into the mysterious new CEO who had bought out Sterling and Vance last week and gutted her career before he had even formally introduced himself to the floor. But the words died in her throat. The air violently left Clara's lungs. She froze, her hand still gripping the stainless steel door handle. Behind the expanse of polished black walnut, framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, sat the new chief executive officer. He wore a charcoal suit tailored so perfectly it looked like a weapon. His dark hair was immaculately kept, his posture radiating the terrifying, absolute stillness of a man who owned the oxygen in whatever room he occupied. He slowly capped his silver fountain pen. The tiny click sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. Then he looked up. His eyes were exactly the same. Dark, piercing, and ruthlessly calculating. 6 years. Clara had spent 6 years burying the memory of those eyes. 6 years outrunning the hazy, neon-drenched light of a Las Vegas hotel room. She had been a terrified, drowning, 23-year-old law student at a conference. He had been a devastatingly handsome stranger with a drink and a reckless smile. One night of spectacular, tequila-soaked stupidity had ended in a 24-hour chapel, a hastily signed marriage certificate, and a cheap silver ring left abandoned on a nightstand when Clara panicked and fled before sunrise. She had told herself it was just a mistake. A ghost she would never have to face again. But the ghost was sitting in the highest seat of power in her world. Clara's knuckles turned white on the door handle. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped bird. Pretend, her survival instincts screamed. Pretend you don't know him. Pretend he is just another corporate suit. She let go of the door. It clicked shut behind her, sealing them in. Clara forced her spine straight, drawing on every ounce of her courtroom discipline. "Mr. Croft," Clara said. Her voice was steady, a razor-sharp blade of professionalism that completely betrayed the tremor in her hands. "I am Clara Scoth, lead counsel on the Vanguard case. Or I was until your office stripped me of my credentials 4 minutes ago. I want to know why." Marcus didn't blink. He didn't look confused. He didn't pretend he was meeting a stranger. Instead, he leaned back in his heavy leather chair, his dark eyes doing a slow, deliberate sweep of her tailored suit, her pinned-back hair, and finally, the fierce, panicked defiance in her eyes. "You've changed your hair, Clara," Marcus said. His voice was a low, dark timbre that vibrated right through the soles of her shoes. Clara stopped breathing. The glass walls of the office felt like they were shrinking. "But the fire," Marcus murmured, a slow, dangerous smile curving the corner of his mouth, "is exactly the same as it was in Nevada." He wasn't playing dumb. He knew. He knew exactly who she was, and the terrifying calm in his voice proved that this wasn't a coincidence. "I don't know what you are talking about," Clara lied, her voice dropping into a harsh, frantic whisper. "I am here about the Vanguard litigation. A case I built. You cannot parachute a senior partner into a trial 3 days before opening statements. It's professional suicide for this firm." Marcus stood up. He was 6'2" of tailored, intimidating authority. He bypassed his desk, walking slowly across the plush carpet until he was standing exactly 2 feet in front of her. Clara forced herself not to take a step back. She was close enough now to smell his cologne, cedar, bergamot, and expensive scotch. The scent was a violent trigger, ripping away her professional armor and leaving her utterly exposed. "We aren't going to do this, Clara," Marcus said softly, the corporate chill in his tone replaced by something far more intimate and far more dangerous. "We aren't going to play the game where you pretend you didn't run out of my hotel room while I was sleeping. And we certainly aren't going to pretend that I bought a $70 million law firm just to talk to you about a mid-level corporate lawsuit." Clara's vision blurred at the edges. The floor seemed to drop out from underneath her. "You bought the firm," Clara whispered, her legal mind struggling to process the sheer, terrifying scale of what he was saying. "You bought Sterling and Vance, because of me. You are exceptionally hard to track down, Miss Scoth," Marcus replied smoothly, slipping his hands into his pockets. "You changed your phone number. You moved to the East Coast. You spent 6 years building a flawless, untouchable reputation. But you left one very important piece of paperwork behind." He turned back to his desk, picked up a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper, and held it out to her. Clara didn't need to read the fine print. She recognized the gold foil seal of Clark County, Nevada. "I want an annulment," Clara said instantly, the words tearing out of her throat. Her professional mask shattered completely. "I wanted one 6 years ago, and I want one now. It was a mistake. We were drunk. It means nothing." Marcus stepped into her personal space. The physical distance between them evaporated, leaving only a fraction of an inch of highly charged, volatile air. "It means," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a harsh, private octave, "that legally you are Clara Croft. It means that while you were spending the last 3 years clawing your way to the top of this firm, I was spending the last 3 years figuring out how to buy it out from under you." Clara tilted her chin up, her eyes blazing with a furious, desperate heat. "You cannot hold my career hostage. I will quit. I will walk out of this building right now and take my clients with me." "Check your employment contract, Clara," Marcus whispered, his dark eyes dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before snapping back to her furious gaze. "Section 4, Non-Compete Clause. If you walk out that door, you cannot practice law in the state of New York for 5 years. You lose Vanguard. You lose your senior partnership. You lose everything you bled for." Clara felt the trap snap shut around her ankle. The cold, brutal reality of her situation crashed down on her. She was entirely at his mercy. The man she had run from was now the man who owned her future. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" she asked, her voice trembling with unadulterated rage. Marcus reached out. His fingers brushed the lapel of her blazer, a touch so light it could have been accidental, but so deliberate it sent a shockwave straight down her spine. "I evaluate the risks for this firm," Marcus said, his thumb grazing her collarbone, causing her breath to hitch visibly. "And right now, your independence is a liability. You want your precious partnership, Clara? You are going to have to earn it. By moving your things into the office right next to mine. He stepped back, the warmth of his proximity vanishing, leaving her shivering in the cold air conditioning of the room. You will report directly to me, Marcus commanded, turning his back on her and sitting down at his desk. He picked up his pen, dismissing her completely. Every meeting, every email, every case. You are mine from 9 to 5, Clara. And if you want to keep your career, you are going to prove to me exactly how good of a partner you can be. Clara stood frozen, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The romantic obstacle hadn't just been planted, it had completely consumed her world. She wasn't just fighting for her career anymore. She was fighting for her survival against the man she was already married to. And that's the end of episode 1. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments below. Your feedback helps us know you're watching and encourages us to keep bringing you more content. See you in the next episode. Episode 2, The Glass Cage. Clara didn't sleep. At 7 a.m. on Tuesday, the 42nd floor of Sterling and Vance was supposed to be a sanctuary of quiet productivity. For Clara Scoth, it felt like the staging ground for an execution. She stood in her small, aggressively beige office, dropping the final, 70-page Vanguard deposition file into a cardboard banker's box. The heavy thud echoed in the silence. 3 years of work, boxed up and handed over because the man who legally owned her name demanded it. So, the rumors are true. Clara froze. She didn't look up from the cardboard box, recognizing the voice immediately. Seth Blake. He was a mid-level associate with a trust fund, a tailored Italian suit, and a dangerous talent for weaponizing office gossip. I am transitioning my caseload, Seth, Clara said, her voice completely devoid of inflection. She taped the box shut, the sharp rip of the adhesive cutting through the quiet. Standard executive restructuring. Seth leaned against her doorframe, crossing his arms. His eyes darted to the empty space on her desk where her framed law degree usually sat. Right. Restructuring. Because parachuting a senior partner into the Vanguard trial 3 days before opening statements makes perfect strategic sense. Everyone in the bullpen is saying Croft gutted you. Everyone in the bullpen bills by the hour, Clara replied smoothly, finally lifting her chin to meet his gaze. I suggest you go do the same. Seth held his hands up in mock surrender, but his eyes were entirely too sharp. Just saying, Clara. You built that case. Now you're packing your own boxes before 8 a.m. If the new CEO is cleaning house, the rest of us want to know where the bodies are going to be buried. He tapped the doorframe twice and walked away. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her hands were shaking. She curled them into fists, driving her nails into her palms until the physical sting grounded her. Reputation was the only currency that mattered in this firm. For 3 years, she had been the untouchable, emotionless machine of the litigation department. Now, after exactly one closed-door meeting with Marcus Croft, there was blood in the water. She picked up her briefcase and the box of essential files, bypassing the elevators and taking the heavy concrete stairwell up to the executive suite. She needed the physical burn in her legs to steady her pulse. When she pushed through the heavy glass doors of the CEO's reception area, Emma Frost, the junior paralegal, didn't offer a sympathetic smile. She simply pointed her pen toward a door adjacent to Marcus's corner office. Mr. Croft expects you to be settled by 8:30, Emma said quietly. Clara walked toward the door and opened it. The box nearly slipped from her fingers. It wasn't an office. It was a fishbowl. The room was sleek, modern, and shared a completely transparent, floor-to-ceiling glass wall directly with Marcus's office. There were no blinds. There was nowhere to hide. Every time she looked up from her desk, she would be staring directly into the space where the man who held her career hostage sat. And right now, Marcus was standing on the other side of that glass. He had his suit jacket off, his white dress shirt rolled up to his forearms, revealing the faint, silver scar on his left wrist. It was a scar Clara knew he had gotten from a broken tequila bottle 6 years ago in Nevada. He didn't wave. He simply picked up a thick, leather-bound dossier from his desk, walked to the connecting door between their offices, and let himself in. The scent of cedar and bergamot instantly consumed the small room, suffocating the sterile smell of office cleaner. "You're 3 minutes late, Miss Scoth," Marcus said, his voice a low, dark rumble that made the small hairs on the back of Clara's neck stand up. He dropped the heavy dossier onto her new, immaculate desk. "And you have a bizarre definition of appropriate workspace," Clara shot back, ignoring the file. She stepped into his airspace, refusing to let the glass cage intimidate her. "I cannot work in here. Client confidentiality requires a secure environment. I can see everything on your desk." "Yes," Marcus murmured, his dark eyes dropping to her mouth before slowly tracking back up to her furious gaze. "And I can see everything on yours." "That is exactly the point." Clara's chest tightened. She took a deliberate half-step back, trying to put professional distance between them, but the small office made it impossible. "I told you yesterday. I want an annulment. Putting me in a glass box next to you isn't going to make me drop it. It's going to make me file a harassment claim." "You won't," Marcus said, delivering not a threat, but a terrifyingly calm observation. He reached forward and tapped the leather dossier he had just dropped. "Because you are far too ambitious to walk away from what is inside this folder." Clara stared at his hand, the same hand that had once threaded through her hair in a neon-lit hotel room. She swallowed the memory like a jagged pill and looked at the gold lettering embossed on the leather. The Dean Enterprise acquisition. Her breath hitched. Dean Enterprise wasn't just a corporate merger, it was the largest hospitality buyout in the country. It was the kind of career-making, legacy-defining case that made senior partners cry when they weren't assigned to it. "You're putting me on the Dean acquisition," Clara whispered, the lawyer inside her temporarily overriding the furious hostage. "I am making you the sole legal liaison for the merger," Marcus corrected smoothly, stepping closer. The air between them practically hummed with an invisible, high-voltage wire. "You will draft the contracts. You will manage the risk. And you will sit beside me in every single negotiation meeting with their CEO." Clara looked up, her mind racing. "Chloe Dean." Marcus smiled. It was a devastating, predatory thing. "Exactly. Chloe Dean. She is notorious for requiring intimate assurance before she signs over her family's legacy. She wants dinners. She wants late-night strategy sessions. She wants to know the man buying her company is fully devoted to the partnership." Clara's blood turned to ice. She suddenly understood the architecture of the trap he had just sprung. "You want me to sit in a room and watch you play the billionaire bachelor to close a deal," Clara said, her voice trembling with a lethal mixture of horror and realization. "While I draft the paperwork." Marcus stepped into her space, his chest mere inches from hers. He leaned down, his voice dropping to a harsh, private whisper that belonged in a bedroom, not a boardroom. "I want you to sit in that room, Clara," Marcus said softly, his dark eyes burning into hers, "and remember exactly whose name is already on your marriage certificate. You wanted the fast track to the top? Welcome to the executive suite. Our first dinner with Ms. Dean is at 8 tonight." Clara stared at him as he straightened up, adjusting his cuffs with infuriating calm. "Dress accordingly," he added, turning toward the connecting door. "We are going to be spending a lot of time together. It would be a shame if the board started to gossip about the tension between the CEO and his new favorite lead counsel." He stepped back into his office, leaving the door open just enough so the quiet hum of his space bled into hers. Clara collapsed into her new chair, the pristine leather squeaking under her weight. She looked through the glass wall. Marcus was already back at his desk, perfectly composed, reading a document as if he hadn't just flipped her entire world upside down for the second time in 24 hours. She was trapped. Legally, professionally, and physically. The glass walls offered no protection, only exposure. Clara opened the Dean dossier, the crisp pages feeling heavy with consequence. If she fought him, she lost everything she had worked for. If she played his game, she risked losing the only thing she had left, herself. She grabbed a pen, pressing the nib so hard against the legal pad that it nearly tore the paper. Fine, she thought, her eyes narrowing as she glared through the glass at her husband. You want a partner, Marcus? I'll give you a war. And that's the end of episode 2. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments below. Your feedback helps us know you're watching and encourages us to keep bringing you more content. See you in the next episode. Episode 3, The Liability. At 7:45 p.m., the back of the black Maybach was a sensory deprivation chamber, save for the suffocating scent of Marcus Croft's cedar and bergamot cologne. Clara Scoth sat as far right as the leather seats allowed, her posture rigidly perfect. She had swapped her daytime blazer for a tailored, sleeveless black silk dress she kept in her office for emergency client dinners. It was professional armor, cut sharp and completely unforgiving. Marcus sat beside her, the ambient streetlights of Manhattan strobing across his sharp jawline. He was reading an email on his phone, looking entirely unbothered by the fact that he was breathing the same recirculated air as the woman he was holding hostage. You are clenching your jaw, Miss Scoth, Marcus said, not looking up from his screen. If you crack a tooth before the appetizer, Ms. Dean might question our firm's ability to handle pressure. I am reviewing the non-disclosure parameters in my head, Clara lied, her voice dropping to a glacial chill. Since you refused to brief me on your specific strategy for this dinner. Marcus finally locked his phone and slipped it into his suit jacket. He turned his head, his dark eyes sliding over the line of her throat, the bare skin of her arms, and the tense, white-knuckled grip she had on her clutch. The strategy is simple, Marcus murmured, his voice dropping into the quiet space between them. Chloe Dean wants to feel in control. She wants to believe she holds the power to walk away from a $2 billion buyout. You will let her believe that. You will answer her legal questions with the flawless, terrifying precision you are famous for. And you will not, under any circumstances, let her see that you are currently plotting my murder. I am a lawyer, Marcus, Clara said smoothly. I don't plot murders. I plot airtight legal defenses for justifiable homicides. A low, dark chuckle vibrated in Marcus's chest. It was a terrifyingly intimate sound. I missed that sharp tongue, Clara. For 6 years, I wondered if corporate life had dulled it. The car glided to a halt in front of a heavily guarded, exclusive restaurant in Tribeca. We are here, Clara said, ignoring the bait. She reached for the door handle, desperate for oxygen. Marcus's hand shot out, his fingers wrapping around her wrist. The physical contact sent a jolt of electricity straight up her arm. His grip wasn't bruising, but it was absolute. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat as he pulled her slightly closer. Rule number 1 for tonight, Marcus whispered, his face inches from hers, the heat of his breath brushing her skin. We present a united front. Ms. Dean is a predator. If she senses even a fraction of an inch of daylight between us, she will use it to tear this deal apart. Understood? Clara stared into his dark, calculating eyes. Let go of me, Mr. Croft. Marcus held her gaze for one agonizing second longer before releasing her wrist. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his cuffs, instantly transforming back into the untouchable billionaire CEO. Clara followed him out, masking the tremor in her hands. Inside the restaurant, the lighting was dim and the acoustics were engineered for deep, expensive secrets. The maitre d' led them to a secluded, crescent-shaped leather booth in the back. Chloe Dean was already there. She was exactly as the business magazines described her, a 30-year-old heiress with sharper instincts than her father and a reputation for eating corporate raiders alive. She wore a crimson dress that demanded attention and a smile that looked like a weapon. Marcus, Chloe purred, standing up to kiss him on both cheeks. She lingered on the second kiss a fraction of a second too long. You made me wait. I was starting to think Sterling and Vance wasn't serious about my family's legacy. I am always serious about assets of your caliber, Chloe, Marcus replied smoothly, his voice a rich velvet that made Clara's stomach twist. He stepped back and gestured to Clara. Allow me to introduce my lead counsel for this acquisition. Clara Scoth. Chloe's amber eyes slid to Clara, performing a rapid, head-to-toe calculation. The heiress's smile cooled by 3 degrees. A female lead counsel. How progressive of you, Marcus. I usually expect a gray-haired senior partner with a golf handicap to try and talk me out of my shares. Miss Scoth doesn't play golf, Marcus said, sliding into the booth next to Chloe, leaving Clara to take the seat across from them. She just wins. We will see about that, Chloe murmured, signaling the waiter for a bottle of Bollinger. For the first 45 minutes, Clara played her part perfectly. When Chloe tested the waters with aggressive questions about asset liquidation and severance liabilities, Clara dismantled her concerns with lethal, emotionless precision. Clara proved she knew the Dean Enterprise portfolio better than Chloe's own internal legal team. Chloe noticed. And Chloe didn't like being outsmarted by another woman in front of Marcus. As the waiter cleared the main courses, Chloe leaned closer to Marcus, resting her hand lightly on his forearm. She traced the edge of his expensive watch with a manicured nail. You have a brilliant attack dog, Marcus, Chloe said, her eyes fixed on him. But numbers and contracts are boring. I don't do business with corporations. I do business with men. I need to know the man I am handing my empire to. I am an open book, Chloe, Marcus replied, his voice laced with dangerous charm. He didn't move his arm away from her touch. Clara took a slow sip of her ice water, her chest tightening. He was doing this on purpose. He was playing the willing target to punish her. Are you? Chloe asked, leaning in closer, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. Because Wall Street says you're a ghost. You bought this law firm out of nowhere. You have no public ties, no weaknesses. My father always warned me never to trust a man who has nothing to lose. So tell me, Marcus, is there a Mrs. Croft hiding somewhere? The air in the booth instantly stopped moving. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. She gripped the stem of her water glass so hard the crystal groaned. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't pull away from Chloe. Instead, his dark, piercing gaze slowly shifted across the table, locking directly onto Clara. The amusement in his eyes was gone, replaced by something dark, possessive, and utterly ruthless. That is a fascinating question, Chloe, Marcus murmured, his eyes burning into Clara's. But as the CEO, I try not to speak on my own legal liabilities. He leaned back, gesturing casually across the table. Miss Scoth is my lead counsel, Marcus said, his voice ringing with absolute authority. She has vetted my entire background. She knows every secret, every contract, every legal obligation I have in this world. Why don't we ask her? Chloe turned her sharp, expectant gaze to Clara. Well, Miss Scoth, Chloe asked, a mocking smile on her lips. Does your boss have a secret wife? Or is he entirely on the market? Clara stared at Marcus. He had trapped her in a flawless, inescapable cage. If she told the truth, she torpedoed the $2 billion deal and violated her non-disclosure, giving him the power to ruin her career. If she lied and said he was single, she was legally denying her own existence and actively handing her husband over to the heiress currently touching his arm. Marcus raised an eyebrow, waiting. Go ahead, Clara. Tell the client the truth. Am I a free man? And that's the end of episode 3. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments below. Your feedback helps us know you're watching and encourages us to keep bringing you more content. See you in the next episode. Episode 4. The Dormant Liability. The silence in the crescent-shaped leather booth was heavy enough to crush diamonds. Chloe Dean's manicured hand remained resting on Marcus's forearm. She was waiting, a predatory smile playing on her lips. Across the table, Marcus leaned back, his dark eyes fixed entirely on Clara. He wasn't just watching her, he was consuming her. He was waiting to see if she would break her professional composure and detonate a $2 billion acquisition just to spite him. Clara took a slow, deliberate breath. The air in her lungs felt like glass. She set her crystal water glass down. The soft clink against the table sounded unnaturally loud. She didn't look at Chloe. She kept her eyes locked dead on her husband. Mr. Croft's personal assets, Clara began, her voice dropping into the smooth, frictionless cadence of a seasoned litigator, are currently entangled in a pre-existing, ironclad contract. Marcus's jaw twitched. Just a fraction of a millimeter. Chloe's smile faltered, her hand slowly slipping off Marcus's arm. A contract? What kind of contract? The restrictive kind, Clara replied seamlessly, finally turning her gaze to the heiress. However, the opposing party in this specific agreement has spent the last 6 years actively fleeing the terms. The contract has not been honored, consummated, or legally maintained. Clara paused, letting her eyes slide back to Marcus. She let a razor-sharp, mocking smile touch her lips. Legally speaking, Miss Dean, it is a completely dormant liability. Mr. Croft is entirely unattached and more than capable of devoting his full, undivided attention to your assets. For 3 agonizing seconds, Marcus stared at her. The amusement in his eyes vanished entirely, replaced by a dark, volatile storm. Dormant liability. She had just legally classified their marriage as a dead corporate asset right to his face. Then Chloe laughed. It was a sharp, relieved sound. God, you lawyers know how to make a woman's ex-wife sound like a tax penalty, Chloe purred, picking up her champagne flute. She turned back to Marcus, her predatory interest completely restored. A messy divorce, Marcus? You should have just said so. I prefer men who come with a little collateral damage. It means they know how to survive a war. I am surviving it, Chloe, Marcus murmured, his voice a lethal, low rumble that never left Clara's face. But the opposing party is proving to be incredibly stubborn. The rest of the dinner was a blur of aggressive financial posturing. Clara executed her role flawlessly, dismantling Chloe's legal traps while forcing herself to watch the heiress openly flirt with the man Clara was legally bound to. Every time Chloe laughed and touched Marcus, Clara felt an irrational, violent spike of heat in her chest. She hated him. She hated him for doing this to her. But worse, she hated the fact that watching another woman touch him felt like a physical violation. By 10:30 p.m., the check was paid. The 3 of them stood on the curb outside the restaurant, the cold New York air a welcome relief against Clara's flushed skin. Chloe's private driver pulled up in a sleek silver Bentley. I'll have my team review your initial restructuring proposals, Marcus, Chloe said. She stepped into his space, pressing a kiss to his cheek, her hand lingering on his chest. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. We have a lot of late nights ahead of us. Good night, Chloe, Marcus said smoothly. Chloe offered Clara a dismissive nod and slid into her car. The Bentley pulled away, leaving Clara and Marcus standing alone on the illuminated Tribeca sidewalk. The second the taillights disappeared around the corner, the professional illusion shattered. Marcus turned to her. In 2 long strides, he crossed the pavement, backing Clara up until her spine hit the cool metal of his parked Maybach. He didn't touch her, but he didn't need to. He planted a hand on the roof of the car just above her head, trapping her in his shadow. A dormant liability? Marcus whispered, his voice dangerously soft. The scent of scotch and cedar completely overwhelmed her senses. Clara tilted her chin up, refusing to shrink away from the heat radiating off his body. It was the legal truth. You told me to answer the client, Mr. Croft. I answered her. You practically gift-wrapped me for her, Marcus growled, leaning down until his lips were inches from her ear. Did you enjoy sitting across the table and watching another woman put her hands on your husband, Clara? You are not my husband, Clara hissed, her hands balling into fists at her sides. You are a mistake I made when I was 23 and drowning in tequila. And I am not going to let you use Chloe Dean to torture me into submission. Sign the annulment. Marcus pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. The streetlights caught the savage, territorial gleam in his dark irises. "No," he said simply. "Marcus." "I told you in my office," Marcus cut her off, his voice hardening into absolute authority. "You want your partnership? You want your freedom? You have to earn it. So, I will make you a deal, Miss Scoth." Clara stopped breathing. "What deal?" Marcus reached out, his knuckles lightly grazing the exposed skin of her collarbone. She shivered instantly, a treasonous reaction she couldn't suppress. "You closed the Dean Enterprise acquisition," Marcus said, his eyes tracking the nervous flutter of her pulse at her throat. "You sit by my side, you draft the ironclad contracts, and you ensure Chloe signs her company over to Sterling and Vance within the next 14 days. You do that flawlessly, without breaking your professional facade." "And?" Clara prompted, her voice tight. "And," Marcus finished, his gaze snapping back to hers, "the second her signature is on the dotted line, I will sign the annulment papers. You get your partnership, and you get your freedom." Clara searched his face for the trap. It was too easy. A 2-week sprint to close the biggest deal of her life in exchange for the permanent erasure of her greatest mistake. "Fine," Clara said, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "I accept." Marcus's mouth curved into a slow, devastating smile. It was the exact smile he had given her in Nevada right before everything went wrong. "I thought you might," Marcus murmured, stepping back and opening the heavy door of the Maybach for her. "Which is why I already instructed your assistant to clear your schedule and pack a bag." Clara froze, her hand hovering over the door frame. "Pack a bag? For what?" "Chloe Dean doesn't sign contracts in New York," Marcus said smoothly, sliding his hands into his pockets. "She requires an on-site audit of her flagship hospitality properties before she hands over the keys to her kingdom. We are doing this on her turf." A cold pit opened in Clara's stomach. "Where?" "Her largest casino resort," Marcus replied, the dark amusement returning to his voice as he watched the realization hit her. "Our private jet leaves tomorrow at 6 a.m. Clara's heart stopped. "We are going to Las Vegas, Clara," Marcus said softly. "Try not to run away this time." And that's the end of episode 4. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments below. Your feedback helps us know you're watching and encourages us to keep bringing you more content. See you in the next episode. Episode 5, Airspace. The seatbelt sign above them chimed with a soft, expensive ping. Clara Scoth didn't look up from her iPad. For the last 4 hours, she had remained completely frozen in the cream leather seat of the Gulfstream G650, staring at the digital pages of the Dean Enterprise Risk Assessment. She was exactly 40,000 feet in the air, but she had never felt more cornered. Across the narrow aisle, Marcus Croft was drinking black coffee and reviewing a quarterly earnings report. He hadn't spoken a single word to her since takeoff. He didn't need to. The sheer, suffocating gravity of his presence in the enclosed cabin was doing all the talking. Every time he shifted his weight, every time the heavy cardstock of his report rustled, Clara's pulse spiked. "You have been staring at Section 4, Clause B for exactly 32 minutes, Clara." His voice cut through the low hum of the jet engines like a velvet blade. Clara blinked, her eyes burning. She finally looked up. Marcus had lowered his report. His dark, calculating eyes were pinned directly on her, tracking the faint, exhausted shadows under her eyes. "I am being thorough," Clara replied, her voice perfectly leveled. She tapped her stylus against the screen. "Chloe Dean's flagship casino, the Solstice, has a staggering amount of unresolved union grievances. If we inherit these liabilities, it will tank Sterling and Vance's fourth-quarter projections. I am finding a way to sever them." "You aren't reading the union grievances," Marcus observed smoothly. He set his coffee cup down on the polished walnut console and unbuckled his seatbelt. "You are meticulously calculating how fast you can force Chloe to sign the contracts so you can get your annulment and never look at me again." Clara's jaw tightened. "I am a multitasker." Marcus stood up. The cabin suddenly felt infinitely smaller. He closed the distance between them in 2 steps, stopping right beside her seat. He didn't sit down. He simply stood over her, his tailored dress shirt stretching tight across his shoulders. He reached down and smoothly slid the iPad out of her rigid fingers. "Hey, the deal was that you closed the acquisition flawlessly, Ms. Scoth," Marcus murmured, tossing the iPad onto the empty seat across from her. He braced one hand on the armrest of her chair, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. "You cannot do that if you are vibrating with enough anxiety to shatter bulletproof glass." "I am not anxious," Clara lied, her breath catching as the intoxicating scent of cedar and bergamot invaded her airspace. "I am preparing for war. Chloe Dean is a predator. She practically mapped out a honeymoon with you at dinner last night. If you think she is going to sign over her empire without testing your limits, you are delusional." Marcus's gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second, a dark amusement sparking in his eyes. "Are you worried about my limits, Clara? Or are you worried about yours?" "I don't have limits when it comes to winning a case," Clara shot back, refusing to break eye contact. She forced herself not to lean back into the leather seat. "I will draft the paperwork. You will play the charming, unattached billionaire for Chloe. We get the signature and we end this." Marcus slowly reached up. With agonizing deliberation, he tucked a stray lock of hair behind Clara's ear. The brief brush of his fingertips against her skin felt like a live wire. Clara shivered. She hated herself for it instantly. "You play the ruthless corporate machine so well," Marcus whispered, his thumb grazing her jawline. "But you are forgetting one crucial detail about Las Vegas." "What detail?" Clara breathed, her professional armor cracking under the weight of his touch. "Vegas doesn't care about your rules, Clara," he said softly. 6 years ago, you were just as fiercely determined to keep your walls up. And it only took 3 hours and 2 drinks for you to completely surrender to me." He pulled back just as the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their initial descent into Nevada. Marcus returned to his seat, picking up his coffee as if he hadn't just set her nervous system on fire. Clara sat trembling, staring out the window as the sprawling, neon-drenched grid of Las Vegas appeared beneath the clouds. "It was a mistake," she chanted in her head. "I am a senior partner in waiting. I am not the reckless girl from 6 years ago." By the time the heavy tires of the Gulf Stream hit the tarmac, the oppressive desert heat was already radiating through the glass. A black Escalade was waiting for them on the private runway. The drive down the strip was a blur of aggressive architecture and flashing lights. Clara kept her eyes glued to her phone, refusing to look out the window at the city that had stolen her name. When the Escalade finally slowed to a halt, the heavy doors were pulled open by white-gloved valets. Clara stepped out into the suffocating, 100-degree dry heat. She looked up at the towering, golden glass structure of Chloe Dean's flagship property. But it wasn't the Solstice Casino. Clara froze. The blood drained completely from her face. Her briefcase slipped from her fingers, hitting the concrete curb with a dull thud. They were standing in front of the neon mirage. It was a slightly older, absurdly opulent resort with massive Roman columns and a 24-hour wedding chapel attached to the lobby. It was the exact hotel they had met in. It was the exact hotel they had married in. Marcus stepped up beside her, adjusting his cuffs. He looked at the towering gold letters of the casino, completely unfazed. "What is this?" Clara whispered, panic rising in her throat, choking her. "Chloe's flagship is 3 miles down the strip." "Why are we here?" "Chloe's flagship is under construction," Marcus said smoothly, picking up her dropped briefcase and handing it back to her. "She offered us the executive suite at her secondary property for the duration of the audit." Clara stared at him, her chest heaving. "You arranged this. You specifically requested this hotel." "I evaluate the risks, Clara," Marcus replied, his voice dropping into that dark, lethal timbre as he turned to face her. "And I decided that if we are going to close a $2 billion deal, you need to stop running from the past." A valet approached, carrying their luggage on a brass cart. "Mr. Croft," the valet said politely. "We have the Emperor's penthouse prepared." I have both of your bags loaded. Shall I take them up to the suite? Clara's head snapped toward the valet, then back to Marcus. The suite? Singular. Marcus offered her that same slow, devastating smile that had ruined her life 6 years ago. Yes, the suite, Marcus told the valet, before stepping into Clara's space and whispering for her ears only. Chloe expects the CEO and his lead counsel to collaborate closely. And as you informed her last night, I am a single man who knows how to survive a war. Let's go upstairs, wife. And that's the end of episode 5. If you enjoyed this episode and have been following the series so far, let us know in the comments below. Your feedback helps us know you're watching and encourages us to keep bringing you more content. See you in the next episode.